And off we go. So it's really great to be joined today with Elizabeth Lovius. My name is Liz Scott, this is Stuart Newberry, and we recently ran an event, a Coaching Connect event, where Elizabeth was one of our speakers. And Elizabeth, you've got a very, I was just saying last night when we met on the Facebook Live, you've got an audacious sort of title for this particular webinar. And that is that basically there's just one problem that the world faces, and there's just one solution. And we're going to look at that later. But in a sec, just for the first bit of this, I'd love to know a little bit about you and your background. So just tell us, who are you, what are you, and what's your interest in the principles and inside out understanding?
I never know how to answer that question anymore. But I can tell you what's in my CV. So I have been working in the field of making things work better for probably 30 years. So my background was in IBM, in process improvement and how you get things to work better in business. And that pretty quickly led me to people. Because you can have the most awesome process in the world, but if people don't come on board and don't feel it, they don't do it. So I got very quickly in my quest for how to do better business, it made really a lot more sense to look at the people side of things. And that led me to the human factor. And so what made sense to me was to become a leadership coach inside IBM. And then I left IBM, and that's basically what I've been doing, is working with leaders, helping them and other people unblock their own potential. But I was always interested in that for myself, first and foremost. You know, how do I get the best out of me? So that took me on an extremely diverse journey through lots of different experiences, all the way from things like landmark education, NLP training, all the different kind of psychological approaches you can take, all the different kind of emotional freedom technique kind of stuff, and encounter groups and beating pillows and holding crystals. I mean, everything, because I'm interested in what's true. So what made sense to me is to experience lots of different things and to find out what's true about them. And you know what? Everything has a grain in it, a grain of something useful and juicy and amazing. But what I noticed for myself personally is I couldn't do it to myself. I couldn't do it. You know, I couldn't make myself better when I didn't feel it. And I will be honest, I felt this dark night of the soul about 5 or 6 years ago, because sometimes my coaching would would have a big impact, and sometimes people would slide back and I would take it like it was on me, right? And then sometimes I would have a massive breakthrough, and then sometimes I would slide back and I would blame my sort of dysfunction in some direction. Oh, I need to fix that now, or I need to fix that now. So, you know, that was my guilty secret, going around coaching executives, you know, being really present and with them and having amazing conversations and impacting their businesses and all sorts of things like that. And then going home and still shouting at the kids, you know. I'm a failure as you know, how can I possibly be just a lot of thinking. So, you know, that's the kind of place I was in, living the roller coaster of life. And I read the Relationship Handbook. And that was a book by Dr. George Pransky. And because my field specializes in relationships at the top, so teams and leaders working together effectively, I was really interested in anything to do with relationships and how to make them work better. Because if you've ever worked anybody with the team at the top, well, let's just say ego comes into play and all sorts. I often see them as a room full of kindergarten kids, because it's not that different really, because they're human, right? So I was looking for sort of solutions in that direction, and I read the book, and I remember thinking, I've never felt so reassured by a book, knowing something was absolutely true. Every word of it was true. Like, it was real. It wasn't a concept. It was actually reflecting something that felt true. And at the same time noticing, sometimes I do that and sometimes I don't do that. And then getting very interested in that and what then I started sort of looking at what's behind it, and then of course came across the principles. And I think that was about 6 years ago. And I think when I read that book, the Relationship Handbook, in one go, I think, I knew that this was what I was going to do now. Little did I know at that exact moment that it was actually a spiritual journey I was about to undertake. I thought I was just going to become a better leadership coach. And what's happened is I don't really think of myself as a coach anymore, because there's something about, I feel quite moved actually. For me, for my training, from what I grew up with, I'm not saying this is true, right, for the word and for the field of coaching, but for me, it always looked like there was something to fix. And that's why I was hired, you know, to make something better. And the more deeply I see my own understanding and the principles, the more I see there's nothing to fix. And yet there's still something to learn, which is just like a very, very fine distinction there, but it's true. There's something to learn about this human experience. So really, I'm probably more of an educator now. And my education area of passion is well-being, because I think that's the source. I mean, it's my word for something you can't give language to, but it's what's at the heart of us all is well-being. And then there's thinking that we have that we're not. And that well-being, that well of well-being, is available to us, and that is the source of anything and everything anyone could ever want, and it's already there.
So that's
an introduction to me.
I mean, what I'm really hearing from that, Elizabeth, is that, you know, sort of working as a coach and consultant from that space of well-being, as opposed to thinking that there is something to fix, sounds like it's at the kind of the crux of the difference, I suppose, between how you turn up now with clients and in the world. And I know that this has led you to, in your kind of quest to sort of gather together evidence and research to collate and be in the process of drawing together something called the Real Change Portal. And I just want to touch base on that first, before we then move into how you see this really impacting in communities. So tell us a little bit about the Real Change Portal and how it came about.
So because I had I'll tell you the feeling I had when I really started studying the principles. It's the feeling of coming home. Just really want to sit with that beautiful feeling for a sec. Because it's what everyone wants. I know it. Like, you know, I know it. And everybody wants to feel at home in their being. And so it really struck me, the more I studied the principles, that is really all they're doing, is putting you back home. And so it just became so obvious to me that everyone should know about this, you know. Like, this helps. This is not things to do. This is not adding to the idea that there's something lacking or missing. This is taking that idea away. This is unleashing some kind of connection with something inside that allows you to just create and be and enjoy. And it was like so clear to me that this understanding offers that. And I could see suffering everywhere. I could just see it everywhere. So I just thought, well, if people knew about this, if more people knew about this would just make their life easier, you know. And I don't want to be the dictator of how people find out about it. I think the most useful way to learn about it is to hear the hope of somebody who's seen something for themselves in a story. That's really the most powerful way, I think, for this information to be felt, because it's a felt understanding. It's not something you get by reading, you know, getting an intellectual concept nailed in your head. It's something you feel. So the storytelling part really made sense to me. But I also know, because I'm like this myself, show me the data, show me the evidence. Does this really work, for example, in the worst possible scenarios? Like people who've been traumatized in their youth, or abused, or people who've never had any parents or guidance, or or people who are really struggling with addiction or mental health challenges. And it seemed to me that prison was the place where that, or had a lot of all of that as a feature. A lot of people have had very difficult experiences before they got to prison and got them into prison. And so I was really fascinated to discover that both Kathy Casey in the US, a guy called Roger Mills working with hello? You can hear me? Okay, sorry, I thought I was muted there for a sec. All of these people in prison had been taught the principles and had extraordinary shifts in their experience. And it doesn't get more, you don't have more reasons to blame your circumstances for your unhappiness than being in prison, right? I mean, that's like a punishment. It's seen as a punishment, right? So you're in prison and you're imprisoned. And so there you are, theoretically without freedom. And yet these people were experiencing a shift in their purpose in life 9 times greater than the control group who didn't get this understanding. So there was data available, hard measured research data of projects also available that people didn't know about. And it just came to me that if people were given access to stories of real change, coupled with data, coupled with a library that gave them access to all the information that they could find out for themselves about these principles, that would be a service to the field. So that's how the Real Change Portal idea was born. And because of my kind of processy, IBM-y brain background, I kind of saw how to do it. I saw the steps that it would take. And as a hopeless entrepreneur, now that doesn't sound like the right 2 words together, I just can't help myself being entrepreneurial. I often take on things that, and when you actually have to implement them, they're harder than you think. But so it's taking longer, but it's definitely coming. And we've created the library, and we're just now looking at the challenges of how you create a story database and make the stories accessible. But we've got the prototype. So it's just now going to grow organically. But it's really a service to the field to say, look, real change happens. And it happens when people have an insight for themselves. And here are hundreds of stories, and here's some data, taken with hundreds of people. And there's something here. And if you want to find out more, here's where you can find out more. So that's really the Real Change Portal.
And I know it's growing, and I know you're building it up as you go. And I know that one of the things that you're passionate about is pointing out if something if it works, if it helps, then and you can see that with the inside out understanding and the principles, that you really see that this can make significant change and impact in the world, then you want people to know about it. Yeah. And I guess this brings me then to the purpose of this particular call, because it does seem quite audacious in a way to say, well, actually all the world's problems just boil down to one thing, and there is just one solution. So I'd love it if you could just take us through what you mean by that, and what's your evidence for that?
Yeah. So it was really cool, because when I first started looking at what was the evidence for the field, I saw that it ran across every possible human endeavor. So health and well-being, every single kind of mental illness, addiction, physical well-being was impacted, any kind of mental stress, anything where you were not feeling right with yourself, massive impact there. Also, there was a lot of evidence, mostly anecdotal, around relationships transforming, people staying together where they were on the edge of divorce, people separating amicably with love and connection, children and parents' relationships transforming, professional relationships, teams learning to listen to each other in a completely different way. And then business performance changing, and professional performance. I know our internal worked with a league footballer who just, went from scoring no 1 or 2 goals over a sort of 10-week period to suddenly scoring 5 in a 2-week period. So the measurableness of it became evident in the performance field, and businesses solving multi-million-pound problems that they hadn't been able to solve before. When people were operating in a different state of mind, they would have different ideas and solve their own problems. So, and then youth and community, which I've talked a little bit about at the conference. People can watch the presentation because it's got quite a lot of data in it. But basically, things like the most troubled area in this county in Miami, where the police wouldn't go, after 3 years, had a 0 homicide rate after having the highest, and gang war all but ended. So really tangible measures across the board. So how can that be? What's accounting for that? Well, it's got to be what I would call the human factor, right? It's in human beings themselves. And actually, there was a quote this morning. I don't know if I can pull it out speedily, because it was one that was on Juliet Fay's Facebook group. And I thought, I have to write that down for you today because it's so apposite, Just give me 1 sec. If I can find it quickly. Don't know if I can. It was so good. It's a Sydney Banks quote. Here it is. So this is a point. I'm now going to point you, in the words of Sydney Banks, to the single problem. The misled thoughts of humanity, alienated from their inner wisdom, cause all violence, cruelty, and savagery in this world. The misled thoughts of humanity alienated from their inner wisdom. So, I mean, you can never really beat Sydney Banks for simple words with great depth, but I'm going to have to say them in my own. See, how that looks to me is when people are feeling bad, right? They're feeling bad. They're feeling bad about themselves, about life, about their circumstances, about something. That whatever it is that's going on, they've got thoughts and feelings, and they're arising together, and their thoughts are kind of triggering these feelings, and they're feeling bad. And all of us, I have it myself. When we feel bad, we kind of don't want to feel bad. so we do something to get rid of it, and all sorts of things come into our minds when we feel bad to do, like, oh, let's just have that glass of wine, or let's just, I'm really feeling bad, I'm going to shout at the kids so that they can behave better, or whatever it is. That's the kind of thinking you get when you're in a feeling bad state of mind. That's kind of how it works. See, this is the human factor. The human factor is very simply, when we're in a state of bad feeling, we get thoughts correlate with that. That's how the world looks. We've got those kind of glasses on our eyes, and everything looks dark, and things look like problems from that state of mind. And things look like permanent and really real, because that's the nature of human nature, is we have this gift that allows whatever is in our head to look real, which is incredibly, it's like we've only got our own little personal movie playing, and it looks like it's real. And then the single problem is that people don't know that their experience is coming from their thinking and not from wherever they've attributed it to. So they've misidentified their experience, because nobody likes that feeling. So, or at least if you don't know what it is, you tend to think it's real and needs to be taken seriously and dealt with in some way, because it looks real, feels real. So this idea of chronic bad feeling, which is a persistent state of bad feeling. If you're in a persistent state of bad feeling, not knowing where that's coming from, creating all sorts of problems and bad feelings and things that look like they need fixing right now, that's what he's talking about. That's the savagery, and the behavior that comes from that state of mind is a low mood state of mind. And so that's the single problem. We're all looking for feelings of peace and being at home. We get a bad feeling. We don't know where it's coming from. We want to get back home. But because the bad feeling itself is only giving us bad ideas, they all make sense in that world of bad ideas. So we just act on them. I mean, I my poor children, honestly, that they are the recipient, because you care so much about your kids, right? So when they are doing something and I'm in a low mood as a parent, and I see their behavior, and suddenly it makes sense for me to get very stern and on their case. Now you can imagine how that's working out for us all. Especially because my elder son is like a mirror image of me and designed to rebel. And so, that, and any sniff of judgment, and he's like either, fighting you tooth and nail or just ignoring, So we innocently kind of get in a low mood and think it's their behavior. I'm going to fix that, like that makes sense in that state of mind. And of course, when I wake up to the truth, I wake up in a state of connection to my son. And the last thing in my mind would be to kind of get all firm and on his case. In a state of connection, I get a different idea. I ask a different question without effort. In a state of connection and peace and love with my son, I suddenly get more curious about it, or less serious about it, or less significant about anything that has to do with me as a mother. That's a biggie. That's a biggie. So you see, so my point is, when you're in a different state of mind, you see different actions to take. And when you're in a low mood, you innocently, and it is innocent, that's when shouting looks like a good idea, but it really does in the moment. And it's innocent, but you don't, but this is where the chronic bad feeling is so useful to know where it's coming from, because I can now know that that's coming from my thought in the moment, not from what my son is doing. So if I know that, and I know that thought passes, I can let it go and wait for something fresh, something a bit more connected to my well-being to come through, because it will, because that's how we're made. And so this chronic bad feeling and people acting from it and not realizing where that experience is coming from is the single problem. Because if you take it away, you're left with well-being. If you take away chronic bad feeling as a temporary state, or mental stress or distress, if you take that away, because it's temporary, it's always changing our experience. And so that particular experience, if you take it away, what you're left with is this natural state, the being of being a human being. And that's, my language for it is well-being. I feel like it's a word that most people can relate to. It's not too, you know that feeling when you're feeling fine, nothing to do, nothing to fix, there's that song from Simon and Garfunkel, Feeling Groovy. Slow down, you move too fast. Got to make the moment last. Just skipping along the cobblestones. Look at the sun and feeling groovy. That, for no reason, that's who we actually are. And in that state, we get creative, we get present, we get what we need to navigate life without effort. So you just got to look at it real simple. If you know where your well-being comes from, the source of your well-being, and you know where the source of your stress comes from, if you have a true and deep understanding, that's the one solution. And the evidence is out there in these impossible scenarios. So I do a series with Dr. Bill, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's the Real Change Live radio show podcast thing I do. And it's got one tonight actually on schizophrenia, and some can't remember the other term, but yeah, generally schizophrenia disorders. So Dr. Bill's a psychiatrist. He goes through all the different diagnoses and labels that people can be given in the DSM manual. So it's, and he's a, you know, experienced psychiatrist of 40 years. Also, he gives medication as needed. So he's proper medical pioneer, really, medical health pioneer. And he's been working with the principles for 30 of his 40 years. And reason I did this series is because he has literally worked with catatonic schizophrenics who are incarcerated in mental institutions and taught them the principles, and they've had epiphanies. And he's worked with people who lost their sense of reality, that they were only talking gibberish. And he was able to get through that. He's worked with people who had every kind of depressive medication and everything, and then they had breakthroughs. So my reason for saying this is that this works in the worst cases of mental degradation, you could say, or the system would say would be that. Because fundamental premise is underneath the chronic stress and distress, which is temporary, is a permanent state of well-being that's available to anyone and everyone through the power of thought. That their experience of a whole new life is one thought away. And that well-being is their true birthright, their nature. Now, that's quite an extraordinary claim, but it is nevertheless, the reason why I like the Real Change Portal is it's all about what's true, what's actually true, what people have experienced. And I think someone asked about the name of it. I can send you a link. It's Real Change Live, it's called. And if you go onto Facebook and you look up the Real Change Portal, it will tell you everything on Facebook group there. So I can't remember the question, but I just knew that I wanted to tell you about Dr. Bill because his direct experience of what we would consider to be in places. Where angels fear to tread, Dr. Bill goes, and has real impact.
Great. So we'll mention that again before we leave the podcast with Dr. Bill. So I just want to go back to what we were saying then. So what I'm hearing you say is that what the principles of inside out understanding points to is that underneath it, we have a foundation of well-being.
Yeah. We
temporarily shift through different moods, and when we go into a stress or insecure thinking, we attribute whatever's in our head as the cause of the low mood. And if we don't realize what's going on, then we get busy trying to fix all the things that we think are causing the low mood, rather than realizing how it's actually generated in the first place. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Beautifully said.
So Elizabeth, I guess the question is this, because there'll be many, many people, I would imagine, going, right, yep, I get that, but it doesn't seem to be working for me. I get it's just my thinking. So what's going on in those circumstances?
Oh, I love it. It's my favorite question. Look, so first of all, I have to say, this is the tip. I have the tip of the iceberg of an understanding of this. Okay, so I can't even begin to claim a deep and profound knowing of what I'm about to talk about, but I absolutely know this is the direction, and I'm seeing more and more every day. Okay, I would like to say that there are two types of knowing a thing. The first, I'm going to call it an intellectual knowing. And it's a kind of informational, factual, oh yeah, I get that, conceptual, up here in your head, makes sense, got your head around it, knowing. It involves a kind of right and a wrong. It fits a particular set of rules, or it doesn't fit those rules. You know, there's a kind of binary nature to it. It's learned from other people. It comes from outside into your head. You know, a lot of school is based on this kind of intellectual note. There's nothing wrong with it. I tell you what, learning how to cook the perfect boiled egg has been of great benefit in my life. And I have mastered the art. And poached eggs too, which are quite hard. So this is informational, right? But, you know, you could read and know every single fact that, and conceptually understand everything there was to be a great lover. But it wouldn't make you a great lover. So it only takes you so far in terms of rich life experience and the being of a human being. There's another kind of knowing that is actually where all people learn from. When they learn a thing deeply, it's a different kind of knowing. Some people call it embodied learning. Some people call it like eureka moments. I like to call it insightful. It's where you see something that you hadn't seen before and you go, aha, oh, now I see what they meant by that. I'm going to ask for an example of that in a minute, so to come through. But it's kind of like when your mother says to you 20 times to do something and you kind of go, yeah, yeah. And then one day you go, oh, that's what she meant, you know. The penny drops. Now that insightful, intuitive, fluid, kind of, it's got a different feeling. It's lighter, it kind of expansive. There's a sense of things coming together in a way that is liberating. It's got a feeling to it. That kind of insightful learning, that's where change happens. That's where effortlessly, you know, and you can't make yourself have an insight, but when you have one, you can't unsee it. You can't see, once you've seen something, you can't unsee it. I've got a really good example of this that I am going to share because it was very powerful for me when I saw it. Until I was about 35, everything was my mother's fault. Like the way I was, the problems I had, the insecurities I was, you know, I'd identified, my incident when I was 4, you know, everything was my mother. And she was very wrong. You know, she could have done a much better job, in my opinion. And it was her fault. And, you know, there were a few blessings in amongst there, you know, but basically, could she not have just done a better job? And my life would have been so much better, kind of thing. And I loved her. And then I had an insight. And the insight was my mother was a human being, just like me. And that was it. I couldn't unsee that anymore. Everything that I saw after that, I saw through the lens of how I would listen to a friend or see one of my clients or whatever. It was just a different listening. It was an insight that my mother had frailties and experiences and vulnerabilities and humanities and everything. She was just doing the best she could. I just saw it. And then suddenly my experience of her changed. I didn't have to make myself change that. There was no effort there. That's effortless change, right? When you have an insight. So this is a long way round of saying, when people say, yeah, I get that, what they're actually saying, and I do this too sometimes, I get that intellectually. That's what they're actually saying. It makes sense. Oh, that's logical. Oh, you know, that's a concept that I can buy into, believe even. That's not what makes change. That's not what creates change. It's a nuanced thing, but you have to have an insight for yourself inside you where you get an aha for yourself into this understanding. And when you do that, then that's what you can trust. And it kind of feels, you know, rather embarrassingly, like a Bart Simpson, why didn't I see that before? You know, okay, I've had a really big one recently. I'm just going to come clean. So embarrassing. I can see Ian Watson's hat up there. He's going to be chuckling at this. Anyway, I knew that I was busy. So 15 years ago, I probably would have been proud of being how busy I am. Okay, because I get lots of things done. I've got a quick brain. I'm always on the go. I used to think that was like a badge of honor. Then I came across the principles and I started to have more quiet moments. And so the rest of the time I was still busy, but I kind of thought that was fine. And because I had this kind of deeper experience from time to time. So I would think I'd got it because I had this deep experience from time to time. But I still didn't have any idea of how busy I still was most of the time. And now I've come to see that it's possible to live a life which doesn't feel busy. Now, I'm not saying I'm there all the time, but I'm there. It's about being, I've realized that in a way you've got to see how busy you are before you can see something new about it. So whilst ever I was living in the idea I'm fine, then I'm not seeing anything new. Whenever I'm living in the idea of I'm open to seeing something deeper, suddenly I get the opportunity to see something deeper and go, oh my God, how have I survived being so busy? Do you know, it just suddenly it appears as, you know, but you know, the great thing about insight, and I really want to say this because it's so beautiful, is there's no bad in it. There's no judgment in it. There might be some sadness, but it's a beautiful kind of release. It's like, oh, I innocently saw that, and now I see something new. There's a beautiful grace in insight. Whilst in an intellectual understanding, I want to say there's always a kind of right and wrong, and I shouldn't have, and I should have been better or something. So if you're in that direction, then you kind of, if you're beating yourself up, then you know you're in your intellect. Right? Because it's just how it works. But when you're feeling like gracious and expansive and kind of enriched, then you know you're in your insight.
Okay, so I want to...
Long answer. Is that okay?
No, it's a great answer. And I want to invite people, if they've got questions, there's a raise hand facility, or you can go into chat and ask a question. And I just want to, while people are thinking of questions, I just want to point out something that maybe is quite challenging about what you've just said.
Yes.
When it comes to sharing this understanding, because the world is very much geared towards intellectual understanding rather than insight understanding. So I'm just kind of wondering how you or we, if we're practitioners, can help share the difference in the message that we're trying to convey.
Beautiful. Okay. So I've got a couple of thoughts about that. Actually, that's kind of what my mission is with the Real Change Portal and its parent, which is the Wisdom and Wellbeing Collective. So the Wisdom and Wellbeing Collective's mission is a global shift in wellbeing, and we do that by facilitating projects of real change. So we want to be able to go and kind of bid for funds and channel those funds into principles-based educational projects, because we believe obviously that's the solution, much like Mara and Eric are doing with One Solution, which, by the way, I feel like the One Solution is the grandfather of everything, and anybody who's got an interest in global change, you really want to check out One Solution Global, because they're up to this on a global scale, and I'm a partner with them. So I have now forgotten my train of thought, what we were talking about. You asked the question again.
Yeah, I was saying that the challenge of trying to share insight understanding rather than intellectual understanding.
Okay, so the whole reason why Real Change and Wisdom and Wellbeing has been set up is for this exact reason. And I'm going to just say this four-word sentence, because this is everything. This is everything. Meet people where they are. That's 5 words. Meet people where they are. Meet people where they are, not where you are. And this is a lifelong journey for me as a person and as a professional. But in the end, that's all people want, is they want to be met and understood in their world and how it looks to them. And so you don't come well, I mean, I've been guilty of this, but, flying your big 3 principles flag, I've got the answer, even though that's kind of what we're saying. Really, that's not right. People don't care about what your flag is. They care that Bill Pettit says it brilliantly. This is vintage Dr. Bill Pettit. People don't care about what you know until they know that you care. So you meet people where they are in their world, and you kind of, I always think of it like inhabit their skin. Like, what is it like to be you? And what is it like, what's going on, and how does it look to you? And then you kind of start there, really. And then, so I want to say, meet people where they are. And then I want to say, when you speak from your own insightful understanding, not intellectual, but your own insightful understanding, that resonates on a deep level with someone else. Like, when I just talked about my mum, that was an insight. You heard that, you felt it, you knew it was true. It might have even opened up something for somebody here, because there's something about when you speak from truth, it's got a ring of truth about it. And I could have got the words wrong and said it wrong, and it wouldn't have mattered. The feeling would have communicated. So that's an example of me speaking from an insight. And that's really important when you're sharing this understanding. But the most fantastic thing of all is, in a way, you don't have to do anything, because this is already true, whether or not you get it across well, or whether or not the person sees it, or what, it's still the truth. So you're on a foundation of how life works. And if it's true for you, it's true for them. So just speak what's true for you. Don't, when it comes to the principles, there's lots of things that kind of people say that get like screw with your head, and you think, what? And, don't go there, because that's not true for you yet. I wouldn't try and regurgitate someone else's words, or I just speak about, meet people where they are, say what's true for you, speak from truth. That's it. And so what we're doing is with the projects is trying to create the message of the principles in its most tangible form, so that people can go, oh, there's something here. There's something here. Let's have a look. Because it's clearly got a tangible impact, because people can relate to that. And then I'm bringing them back into, well, what's made that impact? Insight. So where does that insight come from? Well, it's come from an understanding of the principles. Well, what are the principles? Well, you can't really understand them intellectually. So how do I understand them? Well, look, here's a library. Just find your way.
So what I get from that, Elizabeth, is it's almost like you're leading a trail of breadcrumbs for people to become curious, more and more curious.
Yeah.
I like that. So look, we asked for questions. We haven't got any questions, but Stu's got a question. I know I want to say say something else as well.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Yeah, good. So the Real Change portal, Elizabeth, what's the bit of research that you're really excited about? And I know that you've told us about Modelo, and this it really is a great book, great sort of story of the impact of the principles in a real troubled community. But for you, what have you seen that's gone up maybe recently, or that is up on the Real Change portal that you're really quite excited about?
Thank you. Well, we haven't got all the research papers up there yet, but we've got a good handful. But the bit that I'm really excited about, this is so geeky. It's not, I don't know. Anyway, this is me, okay? You're asking me, so I'm going to tell you. It's a geeky answer. There is a paper by Thomas Kelly and Jack Pransky and Ed, I can't remember his surname right now. And this paper has academic research that proves the premise of the 3 principles themselves. So there are 13 attributes that have been proven in the academic world, not by 3 principles people. But for example, things like moods are variable. or, you know, people have, circumstances do not create your experience. So there are some implications of the principles which have, there are 13 academic references outside of the principles field that prove the principles. Does that make sense? That, for me, that's really exciting. It's like, well, we already know it's true, but here's some academic data that also says what we know is true is true. So it's a bit like, you know, the cutting edge research they're doing on the brain, saying that we do actually indeed live in a virtual reality of our own making, and that we can't know anybody else's world. So we live in separate realities. So this kind of, the scientific field getting in line with these 3 simple principles that Sid saw insightfully for himself, or really there's just one principle, which is there is one field from which everything comes and goes back to, which is permanent. You know, that he saw that, and then he saw the implications of that, and it all sounded a bit sort of woo-woo and spiritual, and then now science is catching up. I find that really exciting myself. I also, however, have to say that science is very limited when it comes to the world of the mysterious world of the formless. There are many things that happen in the world that science can't explain. So I wouldn't use that as my only reference for something, just to say. But, and then the other bit, of course, is Jacqueline Hollow's work with prisoners. I mean, that is on the Real Change portal, and that's just mind-blowing for me. But also the hope that people who have not forgiven themselves, done terrible things, lived through terrible life experiences, really had everything thrown at them, you know, addiction in prison, violence in prison, you know, you're living in fear of your life, some of them, right? That they have woke up to another truth about life. For me, that sort of says it all. That says it all. So that's a very powerful piece of research. And I am in collaboration with Jacqueline, because we're hoping to get some funding for a project she's going to do where prisoners come out and are practitioners of this. And, you know, start working on projects like my projects with the youth and things like that. So it has a ripple effect.
Fantastic.
And talking about projects with the youth, we're very much looking to run something in the Southwest, and I just thought it'd be just nice at the end of this webinar just to touch base on that, Elizabeth, because after you spoke at the Coaching Connect conference, I know that you were quite inspired by the energy, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that. But also afterwards, we were saying, you and I kind of, and Stu said, we want to do something together down in the Southwest. And then we came up with something that feels so right, which is around young people and mental health. Yeah. So first of all, describe the energy you felt down here in Devon in the Southwest, and you know, what you see as what we might be able to provide in July next year.
So Coaching Connect is a phenomenal, and it's born out of Liz and Stu. It's a phenomenal group of people who are listening together, and this is because of you and your listening and your insights and your being in the world. You've attracted it. It's the only way it works. Energy attracts energy. So there's something you've attracted in down in Devon, where people are opening up to another way, a way that really works when it comes to doing life or doing coaching or contribution. And I don't know about the history of that part of the world, but it's got this beauty, this natural beauty, this kind of connection with nature. And I think what we're really talking about with these principles is the nature of human nature. And I feel like wherever, you know, there's a nature in Devon, there's a way that people are, friendliness or warmth. I don't know, it's all going together. But what you have created was when you get a group of people in a room whose hearts are open and who want to contribute, and then you say, look, this works. And then in the room is also people who deal with a lot of suffering in their day-to-day lives, policemen, teachers, you know, witnessing suffering. Put that all together, mix it in a pot, and you get some kind of purpose shows up, right? Some kind of possibility shows up. And then you got a Liz and a Stu in the mix. And then, you know, because they get things done, and then something starts to feel possible. You know, just bring them together in a room and something starts to come alive. And that's really the feeling of Coaching Connect. And I just absolutely, when I met Liz and Stu, I just wanted to be their friends. I just love them so much because they're just good people. And I just thought, oh, I have to come back here, you know, and do something with these guys. And I see the possibility of something being born here down in Devon. And so we riffed about what could it be? And it just made sense for it to be young people. And I just, you know, the possibility of having all people in a community who impacted young people, getting them together, hearing stories of real change and approaches, and then being touched and inspired, and then somehow something coming from that we can't even know, but where everyone's pointing in the same direction, coming from the same understanding, and then everyone using their talents. It's like a tribe. A tribe comes together with a kind of vision that unfolds, and then something becomes possible. And that's what I see for this conference in July.
Yeah, and I love that, because I mean, we've already, we just put a little note out on Facebook saying, you know, this is something we're exploring. And we do a lot of work in schools and education, and we've spoken to some of the people we're working with. And it seems to have really touched the hearts of people that, you know, that mental health with young people and children, and for the adults that work with them, this is something that I think really resonates. So at the moment, it still hasn't really, well, it's in my head and it hasn't been written down anywhere quite yet, but it's growing. It's kind of in that space of evolving. So we'll keep, you know, everybody who's listening to this and is inspired, please keep in touch with what we're up to, because we'll keep you informed on that. So I just want to say at the very end, Elizabeth, we're coming to the end now. Been really wonderful catching up with you, and it would just be good to give people a few signposts and reminders. We talked about the podcast, we talked about the portal, we've talked about the Wisdom and Wellbeing Collective. So it might be a little bit of you know, get your pen and paper out whilst we just remind people of how they can find out more information. But are you okay just to give a few web addresses out?
I can, and I just want to say one thing about young people before I do the web address thing. Is that okay? I do everything pretty much on intuition and gut feel, and just kind of feeling my way through life. And then later on I backfill with evidence and reasons why I did that thing. Okay, so just saying. And I didn't know why it had to be young people, but I knew that it did, and it had to be vulnerable young people, and I knew that it did. But I've come to see, it occurred to me, it's because it's the quickest, because I like it easy and efficient. It's the quickest, most efficient route, because actually the best thing is 5 and 6 year olds. That is the absolute number one. But that's a generation before they're going to be in charge, right, in their 30s. So I think 14 to 24, it hasn't quite baked on yet. You know, the outside in is, they're still open enough, and they're still, because they still open to life and learning, and they know they don't know really, even though they think they do, but they know they don't. And so there's this kind of still, I haven't already decided everything yet. I'm still open, and it takes half as much time to educate people in the principles when they're younger than it does when they're older. So a 12-year-old gets it quicker than a 50-year-old, and not always, but a lot. And Ian Watson will tell you that he's done 25-minute lessons, and kids have started behaving better as a result of it. So young people, it's a really great moment for us to get them when they're in their teenage years, and they're discovering and still open to finding out who they are and how life works. And I think that's what I feel is really helpful for the world, is, you know, and then it's only 10 years before they're in charge, you know. Just a thought, but, you know, I like it. So back to where to find out more. Real Change Portal, www.realchange.info. Wisdom and Wellbeing Collective is wisdomandwellbeing.co.uk. We're in prototype phase on that. We'll have something probably early December, but you can find out what we're up to there. It gives you an idea of what we're up to anyway. And what was the other one?
That was it. The podcasts.
Oh, the podcast. Yeah, if you go on the Facebook group, Real Change Portal, I think Pete's put a link. You will see on the pinned post there all the upcoming Real Change Live radio series. And the best thing to do is to subscribe to the newsletter, and then you get to hear everything that's happening in the world of real change, which is going to grow and grow. But for now, it's the Real Change podcasts that we're promoting on there.
Awesome.
I don't want to leave. This is so fun.
I know. But we can do it again. And I just want to say, if people missed the conference that we ran in November, we are in the process of putting the videos up on the Coaching Connect website. That's coachingconnect.co.uk. And if you look at the 3 principles, 3P understanding, inside out understanding, you'll see those videos. And Elizabeth's is there as well, with a lot of stats and a PowerPoint as well. So it just might be worth checking that out. So, Elizabeth, it's been an absolute delight and pleasure. I just want to say thank you very much. And I know that for the people that have been with us today, I know I just want to pass on their thanks as well. So we will meet again, I am sure, and we will keep you all posted as well with our Young People Mental Health Conference that we're planning for July 2018 here in Devon.
That's great. Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye, Elizabeth.
Take care, and goodbye to everyone who's joined the meeting today. Thank you. Bye-bye.